Donald Trump flew on Jeffrey Epstein's plane at least 7 times that we know of. He pleaded the fifth in civil and criminal cases nearly 100 times. He has 34, count them, 34 felony convictions arising out of 91 criminal charges. He has been found liable for sexual assault, which, as some people who don't attempt to qualify it like I do, call rape, which I have characterized as rape for the reasons I've explained before, because if you put this in front of a criminal jury, the same set of facts with the criminal code, it would be considered rape. Okay, he's had 6 bankruptcies. He's had 5 draft deferments. He's had 4 indictments. He operated a fake university and a fake charity. Both of them were shut down after fraud actions. He bankrupted. This is the thing that cracks me up more than anything. He bankrupted casinos 4 separate times. I talked about this on last week's show. Not once, not twice, not 3 times, but 4 times. How do you do that? A casino is where people come in and they give you money. How do you create a situation where you bankrupt that 4 times? He paid. I mean, this is absurd. You know, we talk about, and I'm getting a little bit ahead of myself because this is just a show opener, but we talk about Donald Trump and we talk about his moral and ethical failings. We don't even need to reach that, although I do. This guy is unfit for the presidency. He's unfit to be elected to any public office, including that of dog catcher. Let's continue. He paid $25 million to settle fraud claims, hundreds of millions of dollars in defamation and civil judgments. Think about that for a minute, okay? Think about what I've enumerated here. Here's a man who has spent roughly $500 million not building schools, not feeding the hungry, not taking care of orphan children, not curing disease like with his charity, but defending himself from the consequences of his own conduct, much of it involving the abuse of other people, many of them women. He is alleged, and I don't know about this, but I know what the allegation is, and I know that the allegation comes from a relatively responsible source. He has been alleged to appear in the Epstein files, his name, literally 1 million times. And yet millions of Americans have convinced themselves that somehow this man is the hand of God. Some of you out there who listen to me believe that he's a prophet. Some of you believe that he has been sent, hand of God, to restore America. And there are churches, literal churches, bearing his name. And this is Politics by Jake.
This is Politics by Jake. Most commentators merely report events. Jake decodes and reveals the hidden systems beneath the headlines. He exposes the enduring, sometimes generational patterns that govern history, politics, economics, and human behavior. Jake names the unnamed. He brings into focus the things that we're hiding, sometimes even in plain sight. And now, here's Jake.
All right, welcome everybody. Welcome to my show. This is Politics by Jake. And on Politics by Jake, basically what I do is I break down economic reality and business reality so you can see what's actually happening. and how to position yourself. And if you want that applied directly to your situation, I offer private one-on-one strategy sessions. The link's in the description. And you can find Politics by Jake on YouTube, Spotify, iHeartRadio, Podbean, most major podcast platforms, and of course right here on KCAA, which is the flagship station. And we are compelled by the situation that we see in front of us with Donald Trump and the fascist cabal that has captured America. I've talked on past shows, recently, in fact, about corporate capture. I've talked about oligarchic capture and the importance of standing up. We have an absolutely, positively existential election in 2026 coming up. In about 100 days now, I'm going to be talking about that. And this, when I say existential, the root word of that is exist. And that by that, I mean to convey this, how the United States will go forth after November election, how it will go forth. Will it go forth as a democratic republic? Will it go forward, for the sake of argument, as a democracy? Although the United States is a hybrid, not a democracy. People call it a democracy, not a democracy at all. It's not a republic. It has aspects, on the one hand, of a democracy, which, to the Greeks meant rule by the common people, or put another less attractive way, mob rule, or the elements of a republic. And Rome was a republic, for example. So it's a hybrid. The founding fathers gave that to us. Benjamin Franklin famously said, we have given you a republic if you can keep it. And we have a situation this year, in these times, which is a lot like the Cold War situation, where a Spanish coal miner, interestingly, of all people, famously opined, you have two choices. You can either get active or you can get radioactive. Because we have madmen, we have Xi, Emperor of Life in China, president for life, but he's basically an emperor. We have little rocket man Kim in North Korea with 60 or 70 nuclear weapons. We have Russia with Vladimir Vladimirovich, who is continually invading, continually pestering, military buildups, trying to frighten, trying to scare, trying to intimidate, and yet Ukraine can defeat him with mere drones. And the thing that you need to be concerned about with a person like him is that he's venting his spleen on the Ukrainian populace. This is the exact same mistake that Adolf Hitler made in World War II. They say strategists, or they say amateurs talk about strategy, but professionals talk about logistics. And when you're in a war, what do you want to do? Well, you want to demean the other countries, your adversaries' ability to wage war. And how do you do that? You destroy their industry. You destroy their means of production. Ukraine, using drones, and they've become like the premier experts in drone warfare, which is funny. I get ahead of myself because drones can be wiped out very easily. The United States has a weapon that can do it. It's called the Leonidas system. It can, so you put this on not a battleship, but I guess an aircraft carrier or something like this, or you can also put it on an Air Force base or a military base, and it will send out a pulse that will cause these drones to drop to the ground. It has a 60-degree arc. I know, you've never heard of this before, have you? I'm telling you, this is the thing. We have this. Our military has this. Why is it not being used? Well, because somebody in the White House has other reasons and other plans. That's why it's not being used. But the idea, in order to fight these things, and there are many uses for drones. There are many. The drone industry, which a lot of people have said, I talk sometimes about investing on this show. I talk about you positioning yourself. begin to look at drone companies, because drone companies are the technology is so diverse. It's based on new physical principles, just like the Leonidas. It's not regular ordnance and munitions. It's an electronic pulse that is sent out into the air that destroys these drones. It calls them to drop harmless to the ground in front of their targets before they can do any damage. New physical principles, lasers, pulse weapons. That's what's needed. Okay, and I'm not sure that there isn't more that I could talk about with regard to that, but I've talked about that more. Let's get into the show because we've got a lot to talk about. So here we go.
We'll return to Jake in just a moment.
And now here's a word from one of our sponsors, Twain Consulting. Hi, this is Jake with Twain Consulting. Let's be blunt, shall we? America is litigious. It's unstable, and it's financially weaponized. If your name is on everything you own, you're a sitting duck. At Twain Consulting, we help you vanish legally, ethically, and permanently. From land trusts to layered LLCs, we teach you how to restructure your assets so the predators can't see them and can't touch them. This isn't a loophole. It's a strategy that the wealthy have used for decades. Isn't it time you got the same protection? Call Twain Consulting at 805-380-5699 or visit us online. Protect what's yours before someone else claims it. And now let's get back to Jake and Politics by Jake.
This is Politics by Jake. Stay with us.
And the billionaires who have, you've got to at least give some credit where credit is due. I don't truck or hold very much with billionaires, but the billionaires who were always too cautious to behave themselves in this particular way, this out front way, they found in Trump the perfect frontman. Donald Trump veritably became their poster child because he's like Mikey. Remember I talked about Mikey in the old Life cereal commercial? Some of you who are older, some of you who are younger, look it up on the internet. Just look up Life cereal commercial with Mikey. The kids don't want to eat Life cereal because it's supposedly healthy. And then they concoct the idea that they're going to give it to Mikey because Mikey will eat anything. And Mikey likes it. This is like Donald Trump. He's their poster child because he wants so badly to be accepted by them. I don't want to get ahead of myself later in the show. And do the things they never wanted attached to their own names. And at the same time, he has unleashed white nationalists, religious extremists. No wonder these people love him. Political fanatics who had long remained at best in the margins of American politics. He has surrounded himself with people like Stephen Miller and given ideological cover to extremist positions and he's given people like this genuine governmental authority. I talk about Pete Hegseth. He's a serial alcoholic and abuser. I talk about Kash Patel. I talk about Kristi Noem. I talk about Tulsi Gabbard, who is like the perfect shill for Russia. So, and look at what has happened. I mean, look at ICE, Immigration Customs Enforcement. I have a great deal to say about ICE. Masked agents, no identifying insignia, baseball caps, sunglasses, people terrified to identify themselves, while at the same time longing. There's this deep urge within them to exercise enormous power over other people, other their own fellow Americans, under color of law, enormous governmental power. Thousands of people have been arrested. You probably aren't even thinking about this, are you? But it's happening every day. Detention camps. I call them concentration camps. This is your government. This is who you maggots and who you others have elected. And these are the kinds of people they have unleashed. These are the kinds of people who have been placed in positions of authority. The kinds of people who have been waiting for permission, literally waiting for permission to commit depredations and abominations upon their fellow citizens. And this was this is what I had to restrain myself with before. You have heard me compare ICE to the Gestapo. But almost in the same breath, even as I am doing now, you have heard me describe them as unregulated yahoos. Morons, chuckleheads. Let me explain why. They often don't have proper kit. In many cases, I'm not even convinced, honestly, that they're ICE personnel, because they see they've been given the authority. They see ICE has been given the authority, and they want to be like them because this is what they long to do. They have watched Mad Max and other movies that talk about the deterioration of society and the depredations, and they long to commit them. And that has to do with their sense of grievance. So we'll talk about that later in the show. They wear ill-fitting equipment, which is one of the things that leads me to believe that they're not even ICE agents. They're the archetypal badges. We don't need no stinking badges. Just get something that says police on it. They drive in ordinary civilian vehicles instead of clearly marked government vehicles. They operate, listen to me, this is happening. It's happening right now. They operate like highwaymen, like highway thieves. They have become a roaming instrument of intimidation. And don't say to me, oh, Jake, well, that's not really happening. It's happening. It's happening right now. Don't wait until our interstates are infested with these people to come to me and say, okay, now, Jake, you can say that. It's happening right now. And unless it's stopped, and unless Trump is stopped, and unless his fascist cabal is stopped, it's going to get worse. Getting back to my point, they become a roaming instrument of intimidation on the highways in the United States. Much more could be said about this. Much more could be said about what I regard as concentration camps, like I said, now existing inside the United States. People are being taken off the streets by the thousand. A couple of weeks ago, 10,000 arrested. You didn't hear it, did you? No. That's because the corrupt, closed, corporate, cynical media on the take, it's not doing it. Why? Because they're afraid. They're afraid of Donald Trump. They're willing, for the sake of their power, for their privilege, for their prerogative, for their salaries, to look the other way, or glad-hand it, soft sell it, soft soap it. Taken off the street by the thousands, not one, not 10, not 20, but thousands. It is happening constantly. It is happening in plain sight. They are in your towns. They are proceeding apace. You know what apace means? It means just like that, just like that. It's not like next month or next week or a couple of days from now. It's happening just like that. And too many people are behaving as though this is no great matter. I'm telling you, it is a great matter. Ask not for whom the bell tolls, Hemingway wrote. It tolls for thee. These highwaymen, these unregulated men, these men who wish, who want to be bad men. Men who have been given permission. By who? By Donald Trump, by Stephen Miller, by the other nut jobs, the other kakistocratic nut jobs who he has placed in government. They have been given permission because they watch the TV and they hear what is happening and they think, we can finally do that too. Finally, the gloves are off. Finally, civilization. Slip the surly bonds of civilization. Pardon me, mixing in Shakespeare with other things. Men who have now feel they have been given permission to express their hatred, their race hatred, their hatred of women, their gender hatred, their hatred of homosexuals and other gender-based situations, their social and their cultural and their societal backwardness. And all of the venting of that spleen with which they have been filled by the likes of Michael Savage and Mark Levin, Rush Limbaugh, and others like them are now being unleashed, finally. And at last, like I say, having slipped the surly bonds of civilization, having slipped the surly bonds of the mos maiorum, the ways of the elders, the ways of the Constitution. These have now been unleashed upon the citizenry of the United States. Now, I know I get a little excited there, but that brings me to something equally disturbing. The election. And I want to get this out in the opener because sometimes, well, it's important. I want you to hear this first at the beginning of the show. The election. Make no mistake. Donald Trump's intention is to disrupt this election. Make no mistake. He knows perfectly well that if the Democrats regain even the House, impeachment proceedings will begin immediately. If they regain the Senate as well, his legal and political position becomes dramatically more worse. And impeachment is bad enough. And I talk about him being a moron. I talk about him being stupid, and others do too. They attribute no intelligence to him. I'm not sure I do, but I attribute an animal cunning to him, which is a kind of intelligence. So he knows this. And his cabal knows it. They are invested in remaining in power. These are not people. I do not fear to say it here on Politics by Jake. These are not people who actually believe in democratic principles, only insofar they believe in democracy, only insofar as when democracy benefits them. It's an entirely self-serving attitude. And if you believe in democracy only when it favors you, well, if that's the case, You actually don't believe in democracy at all, do you? Do you? And that is why this election is so serious. We are now roughly 100 days from the election, depending on where you hear this. Some of you are listening on the show now. It's roughly 100 days. Others of you will listen to it later in the week or maybe even later than that in clips. So I take that into consideration. But just take it into consideration when I say at the time of this recording, we're roughly 100 days from the election. The actual campaign doesn't actually start for another month, but we're still about 100 days from the election. Depending on when you hear this, every citizen who stands up for the United States, the Democratic Republic of the United States of America, every citizen has an obligation to do what they can to not only vote your conscience and listen to Politics by Jake. Cheap plug. To ensure that this election remains free and remains fair. And one of the things that has deeply troubled me has been the enormous, and this is something that's not talked about either. Hence, listen to Politics by Jake. Tell all your friends. Everybody needs to listen to me. My production staff laughs when I say that to them, but it's true. Everybody needs to listen to this message. One of the things that has deeply troubled me that I think that people are not thinking of is the enormous increase in bomb threats directed at polling places. In 2020, there were roughly 67, which were bad enough, and there was a great suspicion that, first of all, these were selectively targeted polling places. And the other suspicion was that it was from Russia, and that Russia was doing it. Russia, Donald Trump said in 2016 at a campaign rally, "Are you listening? Help me take over the United States, because when I do, you will benefit." Do you believe it? Do you think Vladimir Vladimirovich, it's Putin, do you think he believes it? Do you think he wants it? That pestilential country? Not the people, but the government. So, okay, in 2020, there were roughly 67 bomb threats that were. In 2024, there were approximately, and I'm actually giving you an exact number at the same time I'm saying it approximately, there were approximately 237. That's an extraordinary increase. That's an exponential increase. And whether or not those incidents are connected to the broader atmosphere of intimidation, they contribute to it. And intimidation itself, it's real. It's a political weapon. The machinations involving the Postal Service must stop. They must likewise be defeated. They're attempting to remove the drop boxes. Trump is in control of the Postal Service as well. Various attempts to make voting more difficult. These things matter. All these things matter because democracy depends not merely upon the right to vote, but upon the practical ability to vote. Now, I also have something to say about what has happened in Congress. Just recently, legislation passed the House, just the House. 14 Democratic senators voted for the SAVE Act. Why? Playing into Donald Trump's hand. Why? These are people who are terrified of losing their privilege, terrified of losing their position, terrified of losing their seat. That's an understandable human fear, but it's not an excuse for compromising democratic government. When elected officials begin cooperating with what I regard as an abusive government merely to preserve their own careers, they deserve political accountability and they deserve electoral scorn. And I recommend that we remember their names. I recommend that we remember their votes. And in November, using constitutional, peaceful, democratic methods, I recommend that we replace them. Not with violence, not with executions, not with highwayman tactics, not with intimidation, not with threats, but at the ballot box with ballots. Because that's how democracies defend themselves. And if tyranny ever came to America, as Upton Sinclair, who wrote a book saying it can't happen here, warned, it would be wrapped in the flag and carrying a Bible. And this is Politics by Jake.
We'll return to Jake in just a moment.
And now here's a word from one of our sponsors, Twain Consulting. Hi, this is Jake with Twain Consulting. Imagine, if you will, having the power to disappear from the prying eyes of creditors, identity thieves, nosy strangers, all while protecting what you've worked so hard to build. That's what virtual invisibility offers. It's not magic. It's smart legal and business strategy to shield your assets and privacy so you can live free, confident, and in control. Most people think that asset protection is only for the ultra-wealthy, but it's for anyone who wants peace of mind and financial security, including you. Don't wait until it's too late. Take control now. Call me at 213-465-0639 or go to facebook.com/Twain Consulting to learn how virtual invisibility can protect you and your family, because when you're invisible to risk, you're unstoppable. And now let's get back to Jake and Politics by Jake.
And now, Politics by Jake continues.
All right, and this is Politics by Jake, and we are back. And again, on Politics by Jake, you know what I do is I break down economic and political reality, and I do this so that you can understand what's actually happening and how to position yourself. If you want that applied directly to yourself, I do offer private one-on-one strategy sessions. The link's in the description and the show description. And finally, you can also find Politics by Jake on YouTube, Spotify, iHeartRadio, Podbean, and, really most major podcast platforms. Now, I want to almost imitate Monty Python, who changes bits by saying, and now, for something completely different. Now let's talk about something that seems completely different. It isn't, but it's because this is such a serious situation. Donald Trump is once again, he's at it again. It's like I always say on the show, I use the word apace. And apace means that it's going on right now. It's happening right now. It's not something that say, oh, let's do it. Let's do it next year. Let's wait until after the election. Oh, let's wait until after the September Labor Day. It's not. It's happening right now. And so, among other things that could be said, Donald Trump is, once again, threatening Canada. 50% tariff. Now, let's talk about this, because this is interesting for several reasons. First, this ought to make the red lights go off in your head. First, the president does not possess, except in an emergency type situation, some, and I'm not aware that there's any emergency that's been declared about Canada and the United States trade relations. But barring that, the president does not possess some inherent constitutional authority simply to rearrange the American economy, whenever he feels like it. Nevertheless, there are enough frightened politicians in Washington and enough opportunists who are willing to stand aside while he attempts it. It's just like the billionaires. They would not do these people want to work in the background. They don't want to be known. That's why they hate the media, the public media, because the public media tells them, we the people, what is going on. They hate that. That's why they buy up One American News Networks. That's why they buy up Newsmax, so that they can tell their story. That's why Barry Weiss. That's why Paramount. That's why they're buying it all up. That's why CBS, that they're trying to destroy. Because they want their own propaganda arms. Because they don't like CBS News the way it was. Because it told them, again, the American people, where the bear sleeps. And the bear, those oligarchs, they don't like that. They don't want that. The finance oligarchy, the techno-oligarchs, the oligarchs, they don't want it. But Trump is their poster boy. He's like Mikey. He'll do anything. And Trump, he controls Republican primaries. He doesn't have to persuade everybody. He only has to persuade enough people to threaten an incumbent Republican. That is the source of his political leverage, and it's small. It's only really about 25%. That's really pretty much all it is. But that's enough, because things are so close. The margins are so close in both houses, legislative houses. But let's examine, and of course, then you have the Supreme Court, 6-3 supermajority, recently told him to pound sand on the 14th Amendment, the use solely, and when I say use solely, I mean ius, it's Latin, and SOLI, literally the law of the soil, If you're born in the United States, in a place that the United States has jurisdiction over, you are a citizen of the United States. 14th Amendment, new birth of freedom. It's what Lincoln promised. Some would argue that this is why he was killed. Okay. I can go far afield on all of this stuff. Let's examine the Canadian trade issue, shall we? Is there really a $50 billion? He says there's a $50 billion trade imbalance. Well, yeah, there is. But no. Let's talk about this. The United States does import more physical goods to Canada than it exports there. That's true. But that's only the goods account. It leaves out services. The United States sells Canada financial services. So it's insurance, software, engineering, consulting, entertainment, education, business services. And when you include those, the United States runs a very substantial service side implus. Or not implus, pardon me, service side surplus with Canada. And there's something else too. Much of the goods deficit is energy. It's oil. It's natural gas. It's hydroelectric. That's a very different picture from simply saying, America is being ripped off. So when someone tells you America, has a 46 or $48 or $50 billion, whatever it is, trade deficit with Canada, they're only talking about part of the relationship. See, they're leaving out the rest. They're leaving out the rest, and this raises an obvious question. If the economics are far more complicated than the slogans, why does Trump keep saying that America is being cheated? Because tariffs really aren't about economics. They're about grievance. Everything with him flows from grievance. It isn't about Canada. It isn't about NATO. It isn't really about Europe. It isn't really about the universities. The underlying operating system is grievance. Trump's worldview begins with the assumption that America has been cheated. Because his own worldview begins with the assumption that he has been cheated. You see? In reality, in the real world, every negotiation has a winner and a loser. Every compromise is a surrender. Every disagreement is hostility. Every criticism is persecution. He's grievance driven. He's permanently aggrieved. He sees every relationship as a scorecard. He believes every negotiation has not a victim and a winner and a loser, but a victim and a winner. So when he looks at international trade, he isn't asking, is this making America wealthier? He's not asking that. What he's saying is, who's beating us? Those are two completely different questions. And once you understand that, a great deal of what seems irrational suddenly makes perfect sense. The tariffs aren't an economic policy. They're a grievance policy. They're an emotional response to a perceived insult. That's why you can explain Canada. That's why you can explain NATO. That's why you can explain Europe. That's why you can explain the universities. Everything flows from that underlying assumption, that one underlying assumption that somebody somewhere is taking advantage of him, is screwing him. I don't think Melania is, but somewhere, someone is screwing him or taking advantage of America. And that's another reason he surrounds himself with people who never challenge him. I've used let's talk about this a bit. I've used the phrase palace courtiers. This is a phrase I don't really like. I think we need to straighten this out once and for all. It's accurate. It's accurate so far as it goes. But I found another expression. It's an old expression from the Court of Kings. And I found another expression I like better. How about the Amen chorus? An Amen chorus, people whose entire purpose is to tell him he's right. How about yes men? How about sycophants? How about professional flatterers? How about human laugh tracks? How about an echo chamber in suits? People who never say, Mr. President, I think you got that one wrong. So what is it instead? It's yes, sir. Absolutely, sir. Oh, brilliant idea, sir. That's dangerous. That's dangerous in any administration. It's especially dangerous when the person at the top already sees the world as a giant conspiracy against him. Now, that brings me to Russia. Because if you want to understand Vladimir Putin, you have to understand another zero-sum worldview. People often ask whether Russia invaded Ukraine because they were about to lose access to Crimea. Well, not exactly. Russia already had access to Crimea, After collapse of the Soviet Union, Ukraine and Russia negotiated agreements that allowed the Russian Black Sea fleet to remain in Sevastopol. This is just like Greenland. We don't need to take over Greenland. We have reciprocal agreements with Greenland. We have effective control of the situation. We don't need Greenland sold to the United States. But, this is the thing. So these agreements allowed the Russian Black Sea Fleet to remain at Sevastopol. There were treaties, accompanied treaties. There were leases. There were extensions. The Russians weren't being thrown out. They already had access. But see, that's the point. A lease is not ownership. A treaty, it depends on someone else's sovereignty. An agreement means somebody else still has rights. For somebody who thinks in zero-sum terms, that's never enough. Putin didn't simply want access, he wanted ownership. He didn't want permission. He wanted control. That's a fundamentally different objective. And once you understand that, Crimea, that whole situation, it begins to make much more sense. Now, there were certainly disputes over lease payments, fleet movements, sovereignty. Those things happened, but they were being handled through diplomacy. Russia wasn't about to lose access to Sevastopol. What Putin wanted was something larger. He said repeatedly that Russians and Ukrainians are one people. He also said the Ukrainians were Nazis. And he tried to invoke the Russian people's fear of Nazis. So kind of talking out of both sides of his mouth, but he questions whether Ukraine is, which is talking out of yet another side of his mouth, isn't it? He questioned whether Ukraine is really a legitimate nation. He called the collapse of the Soviet Union one of the great geopolitical catastrophes of the 20th century. Those are not the words of someone who's merely trying to preserve a naval base. Those are the words of someone who's trying to restore an empire. And I've called him on the show a revanchist. I'm not the only one. A revanche, it's a French word. It means revenge. He wants revenge. And he wants the land back. And that's where the strategy enters the picture, because strategy isn't just about armies, it's about geography. It's about logistics. It's about supply. One of the things I wish Americans understood more is that wars are won as much by transportation as they are by bullets. Take the Caspian Sea. Most people never think about it, but they should. During the Second World War, enormous quantities of oil came out of Baku, across the Caspian, and then up the Volga River and into European Russia. Hitler never attacked it. That meant if you controlled the Volga, Stalingrad, for example, you weren't simply fighting over another city. You were threatening the logistical artery feeding Stalin's war machine. That's strategy. That's why geography matters. That's why rivers matter. That's why ports matter. That's why railroads matter. That's why I keep talking about the Caspian Sea even today. China moves freight through that region, through the rail line there. Iran sits astride important transportation corridors. Recently, rail links in northeastern Iran became military targets because logistics matter. What did I say? Amateurs talk strategy, but professionals, they talk logistics. Military planners understand these things. Ours do, and theirs do also. You need not think that we don't understand this. We're being prevented by Donald Trump. They always have. Most civilians don't. That's one of the reasons I become frustrated. In fact, you hear my voice now. When I hear people discuss military operations as though they're simply collections of random events, they aren't. They're part of a much larger strategic picture. And speaking of strategy, let's talk about the Straits of Hormuz for a minute, shall we?
We'll return to Jake in just a moment.
And now here's a word from one of our sponsors, Twain Consulting. Hi, this is Jake with Twain Consulting. Let's be blunt, shall we? America is litigious. It's unstable, and it's financially weaponized. If your name is on everything you own, you're a sitting duck. At Twain Consulting, we help you vanish legally, ethically, and permanently. From land trusts to layered LLCs, we teach you how to restructure your assets so the predators can't see them and can't touch them. This isn't a loophole. It's a strategy that the wealthy have used for decades. Isn't it time you got the same protection? Call Twain Consulting at 805-380-5699 or visit us online. Protect what's yours before someone else claims it. And now let's get back to Jake and Politics by Jake.
This is Politics by Jake. Stay with us.
All right, we're back, and it was so much to talk about here. I think the time is going to fail us, but I said we'd talk about the Straits of Hormuz. Let's do that in our closing time here. Every time Iran threatens close it, people act if this is some mysterious military problem that no one has ever confronted before. The Democrats, and I don't agree with this, they say, oh, we're losing the war. Trump has lost the war. Don't want to say this. It's not even the truth. This is not a mysterious problem, intractable, nebulous, that no one has ever confronted before. It isn't. The United States military has spent decades studying exactly this problem. There are plans. There always have been plans. We've dealt with similar situations before, back in, 1987 during the tanker wars. Convoys worked. They broke the blockade. They kept shipping moving. This is an uncharted territory. If you're worried about commercial insurance because maritime, they won't do it, or the British insurers, they're chicken and they won't do it, self-insure. We did that during the tanker wars. If you're worried about escorts, you provide escorts. If Iranian patrol boats, corvettes or other small naval craft come out to harass shipping, you destroy them. You don't have to use these advanced cruise missiles, the most expensive precision-guided munitions in the American arsenal every single time. Conventional weapons, conventional munition, conventional ordnance works very well, perfectly well, against conventional targets, especially with targeting software that we have. And then you do something equally important. You deny them the bases from which those attacks originate. See, Trump doesn't want to do this. He doesn't want to have boots on the ground. This is basic military strategy. When you sail through the Strait of Hormuz, there are these, little islands scattered there throughout the approaches. These islands, they're just not scenery, They're military positions. They're places where missiles can be stored. They're places where radar can be installed. They're places from which attacks can be launched. If you leave those positions intact, they'll continue to threaten shipping. If you neutralize them, you've dramatically reduced the threat. Military planners, they understand this. It's elementary. It reminds me of something that has fascinated me ever since I first traveled. I had the benefit to travel along the Rhine River. You see all those castles sitting on the hillsides, overlooking the river. Why do you think those castles are there? People think, oh, how picturesque. They think they're there because, medieval kings who had a little money, they wanted, beautiful views. And it is beautiful. It is that. But no, that's not why most of those existed. Most of those existed to control traffic along the river, to collect tolls, to dominate the river that was below those castles. If you wanted to move goods along the Rhine, somebody sitting in one of those castles was going to demand payment from you. Control the high ground. Control the river. Control commerce. It's the same strategic principle. Now, only now, castles have become, missile batteries. The toll collectors have become Revolutionary Guards, the Iranian Revolutionary Guard Corps. But the underlying strategy, that hasn't changed. That hasn't changed in 1,000 years. The geography hasn't changed. Only the technology has. That's all. The frustrating part is that our military knows all this. Our planners know all this. None of this is a revelation. This isn't catching them by surprise. The Iranians haven't pulled a fast one on them that we didn't know was coming. They've war-gamed our military, war-gamed these scenarios for years. The problem isn't that the Pentagon doesn't understand the problem. The problem is political leadership. The commander-in-chief, and yes, that's Donald Trump, he has to decide he's going to execute the plan. And in my judgment, Donald Trump has consistently refused to do what military strategy requires. Instead, he seems preoccupied with cultivating poor little rich boy. Richie Rich, the poor little rich boy. This is what he is. I keep telling you. Cultivate personal relationships. He wants Putin to like him. He wants Erdogan of Turkey to like him. He wants various authoritarian leaders to think of him as one of them. He mistakes personal flattery, strategic success, but these people, they are not his friends. They never have been. They think he's a fool. They respect strength. They exploit weakness. And if you spend your time trying to convince brutal men that you're one of the boys, eventually they'll treat you exactly the way brutal men treat people they think they can manipulate. That's why I call him the poor little rich boy. He desperately wants to be accepted into a club that has no intention of accepting him. Using them? Sure. He wants these dictators to admire him. Instead, they use him. That's why I say he's pathetic. That's why I say he's an embarrassment. Because he is, not because America lacks power. Far from it. America possesses overwhelming military power. The tragedy is that we often fail to use it intelligently because our political leadership does not understand these things. And unfortunately, I think we're out of time. The time has failed us. I had more planned, but we're not going to be able to get to it. So thank you for spending the time with me once again. This is Politics by Jake, and we will be back to see you next week. Have a great week, and God willing, we'll see you next week. Bye-bye now.